So this is a review for Leghorn Swoggled, and with me today is my fellow friend who, well, I hope he doesn't hornswoggle me, but my good friend Camden Spies. Say hi.
Hi.
So, it was released on the 28th of July 1951. It had a Blue Ribbon reissue sometime in 1961. It's the 626th in the series, and it's directed by Bob McKimson. There is a HD version of this short out there. I hope it'll come on disc soon because it doesn't appear to be on streaming at the moment. But hey, it's got its original titles back, which is great. That's always a good thing to see. Now, in case you haven't seen this one, Henrey Hawk wants to hunt a chicken as usual. The Barnyard Dog is happy to help but wants a bone. The McKimson cat is happy to help find the bone, but he wants a fish. A random mouse is happy to help with the fish, but he wants some cheese.
Gosh, I wonder what the cheese will want.
And so all the while Henry's on his quest to get those items, Foghorn is tormenting the dog, as usual. Pretty complex for a 7-minute short, I would say. And the only real trivia in this one is that the title itself is a play on a term which I already used earlier on, is Hornswoggled, and in case you don't know what that means, it means someone's getting the better of someone by cheating or deception. Just as an aside, our good friend Jerry Beck even produced a cartoon short called Hornswoggle.
Also helped co-written with Hanna-Barbera historian Earl Kress, too.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely check that out if you can. If there's a chance to promote that short, well, here we are. So there we are. This short is more or less a typical Foghorn short, but what did you think of this short?
Well, there's another reason why I like it, which we'll get to that later, which I was actually surprised because I actually heard those first. This short I actually like. It's a clever idea. Henrey Hawk was a star before Foghorn Leghorn was. But he was a star enough to be one of the major, for example, in fact, in the very first Looney Tunes Merry Melodies comics, along with Sniffles and Mary Jane, which you can hear my segments on those cartoons, he was the star of the Looney Tunes Merry Melodies comic books, and he was the star. That's why first Foghorn Leghorn, it says Henrey Hawk. But basically, so they just trying to break this formula. They had already started doing Foghorns, I think, like a fractured Leghorn without Henrey Hawk, but they needed a way to break the formula because he was still on the Warner Brothers marquees, even.
Yeah, I quite like Henry. I think some of the shorts he's in are pretty good, and this is not the last Henry short, but as you say, he's more prominent in the comic books, which I have read some of them. As I mentioned, this is your typical Leghorn short, and it feels kind of like two shorts in one. That's the feeling I get. And yes, they come together at the end. There is that big punchline, or I guess bone line, when he hits him on the head with the bone. But it feels like they were trying to do a Henry short, but then they just peppered in the Foghorn gags just to keep things interesting. I mean, that's the impression I got when watching this short.
It seems like there's two stories. There's Treasure Hunt for Henry, and then there's the Wild West thing that Henry has.
And I guess just to stretch things out a bit, and because Foghorn by this point was pretty popular, so my guess is that they were doing a Henry short, but then they just peppered in the Foghorn stuff just to, interest those that like Foghorn.
Foghorn and Henry have become a synonymous pairing, too, by this point, so...
Exactly. But you mentioned the whole fetch quest thing, which I think is funny because I'm also a kind of video gamer as well, so it kind of reminds me in a lot of the older video games where you got to find an item, but somebody wants something in return, and you got to do this whole fetch quest thing, so it's kind of predicted that whole thing. The weird thing about this particular story is that it implies that, okay, once he finally gets the cheese, he would go back to this mouse, give the cheese, and then the mouse would say, hey, to get a fish, you need to fish in this lake. But no, we don't actually see that. Somehow Henry knows to go to the lake anyway. So then he what was the point of all this? He somehow figured out how to get the items for everyone, even though he didn't know how to get certain items.
Well,
it's weird.
They only have 7 minutes of time, Bill.
Correct.
Eddie Seltzer was not going to let them have 8 minutes of time to fill out.
Correct. And then what we end up here is just a logic flaw where, okay,
right.
Well, then what was the whole point of bringing in all these characters when I reckon what they probably should have done was maybe in the scene where he's in the fishing hole is to not actually show the cheese and actually suggest that, yes, he actually did go back to the mouse. So you don't have to actually show a scene with him going back to the mouse.
That might have been like a mistake of some kind.
It could be. It just doesn't make any sense. Because at the end of the short, he ends up giving items to everyone anyway. Yeah. So it's like, well, hang on. What was the point of it all? I don't know.
You just tell... Well, it adds to Foghorn's gag. Like, where's my present, son?
Could have just made this whole short like a mysterious fetch quest without meeting the characters earlier on. And he just gives these presents to everyone. And then it's like, hey, where's my present? Bang. Or something. I don't know.
I think you're thinking about this too much.
I am thinking about this too much, damn it. But no, it's all in good fun. Look, aside from that, I can just shrug and go, whatever. I just thought that it just wasn't handled as well as it could have. That's all. So, now in terms of the gags, one gag that I thought was funny, but was kind of weird at the same time, was that train gag. I mean, but you noticed something that was a bit off about that gag.
He's not talking. He's got his mouth moving, but he's not talking.
Yeah.
It's so weird. His mouth is moving, and you can tell he's singing, like, I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day.
Yeah.
But all you hear is the music. You don't hear Foghorn singing.
Exactly. So it's a very weird thing, and another weird gag that has some weird timing. But there's this pause.
Shut up!
It just feels like there was maybe a few extra frames for some reason. I don't know if that was just baked into the cartoon itself, or if that was part of the restoration that was done. I'm leaning towards that it being an error. I don't know. You guys can see this scene and you can tell us.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of errors in this cartoon.
Exactly right. So it probably feels as though they were making this short and it kind of wasn't coming together as well as it should have. So they just wanted to maybe finish it off and just move on to something else. Because the other Foghorn Leghorn short release this year, I thought was actually a lot more funnier and more focused in terms of the story. What? You don't know which one it was? Lovelorn Leghorn. Lovelorn.
I don't know. I got a life. I'm sorry.
I know. Unlike me, right? But
yeah.
Now, but in terms of good things about this short, what gag did you like the best?
I like that where the paint's like paddling his behind.
Of course. We always got to have the butt jokes, right?
I'm sorry.
We got to have those butt jokes.
Or I like the train gag. It's just that I find the idea, the whole weird quietness thing really distracting.
I mean, the train gag I like because I just liked how first of all, he puts in extra effort by wearing actual overalls for some reason, which I love. I like that.
Right.
And he sets up all these tracks, and you think it's going to be something elaborate, but then it's just a pie in the end. And I thought that was hilarious. I was laughing a lot more than I should have, because it's just all that build-up just for one simple little pie gag. I thought that was great.
And it's interesting, though, that Barnyard Dog is still holding that train track. The train track's still set up.
Ooh, so they actually remember that. I wouldn't have blamed him if it disappeared, but I didn't notice that. And of course, I love Foghorn's saying, shut up. And, anytime Mel Blanc does that line delivery, you just get a kick out of it. And of course, his whole...
Nice boy, but he's got more nerve than a bum tooth. Kid don't stop talking so much, you'll get his tongue sunburned.
You mentioned to me that you encountered this short via the records beforehand. Is that right?
Yes. So we originally had planned Tim Hollis and Greg Gerbar, the authors of Mousetracks, the story of Walt Disney Records, to be on this commentary. They were unable to join us because of prior engagements with Greg's family, Greg getting COVID, and Tim Hollis obviously scouring the globe for more toys for his great cartoon collectible museum that he has right here in Birmingham, which you have agreed to actually do something later with us. Now, Anthony, it's interesting that you think that there are two different stories to this, the Wild West and the sharing is caring kind of story. A year earlier, Mike Maltese and Warren Foster wrote Henrey Hawk in a record before Henrey Hawk had appeared in Bugs Bunny and the Tortoise record, but they had wrote a record called Henrey Hawk, which Foghorn Leghorn, he made Daffy Duck, and of course, Foghorn tricks him to think he's a horse and all that. Then they decided to do two records, I think within 1952 and 1953. Really, I think they all came out in 52, which were Wild West Henrey Hawk and Henrey Hawk's Chicken Hunt. Both of these were plotted directly from Leghorn Swoggled, or I theorize if both of them were written by Robert McKimson, because the records, the single album Capitol Records, after a certain point, a lot of them did not get credit. The likelihood is they were written by Warren Foster or Ted Pierce. I theorize that it's possible that they wrote the records first, which is unlikely, but it patterns well that they did this, because the records, they make a lot of sense because their sound, and the first record is just by Henrey Hawk and the Wild West. The whole second record, Henrey Hawk's Chicken Hunt, is all about Henrey Hawk trying to find these little items and fooling Foghorn Leghorn. They're cute records. The interesting thing about this whole ending thing is that there's very little violence to it. They could put a little bit of violence in records. They could have gunshots and all that stuff, but there's not much gags you can put with it, but it plays out so well recordedly without the picture.
Correct. And now my good friend Essie MacPeter just wanted to say a few brief words on this short. Since we're recording other stuff, he's like, hey, I want to add a few bits in, so here he is. So, SC, what are your thoughts on Leghorn Swoggled?
I like it enough, but it suffers really much from having to have Henrey Hawk in it. And again, it feels like at this point, with so many of them having Henrey Hawk, that they just don't have much to work with at this point. As more characters get added into the series, and they use him 2 more times, I believe, after this one, they kind of find new things to do with him. It looks like they were taking some inspiration from early television focusing on westerns with that whole beginning part. I kind of wish they kept with the whole cowboy theme with Henrey, but the real big problem is just that because they're trying to find a new thing with Henrey to do is that they add all these other characters that Henrey has to interact with that it takes away from Barnyard and Foghorn having their rivalry, which is the core of the series, just them going back and forth on each other while other characters get involved in their fight and work with it. Really, this one's just more about Henrey getting help from Foghorn in order to meet his demise, which doesn't really work. And again, because they bring in that McKimson cat design that also appears in the Fractured Leghorn, and they bring in just that random mouse. It just kind of takes away, especially with the fact that he has to do all this stuff that just really takes away from a lot of the good slapstick. And again, you kind of get the whole joke after he gets in the mousetrap where he's going to be the foil of the short and get everything, and then Henrey gets to use it. It has inspired slapstick and such, but it kind of is just a bit of a misfire. But luckily the series does improve after this, especially when they stop using Henrey in each short. That's really just about it. Get back to the rest of the commentary.
All right. I'll get back to Kamden, but before I do that, what would you rate this out of 10?
I'd give it a 7. At least it's well made and has good slapstick in it. Isn't a cheater.
Yeah, exactly right. So, all right, I'm going to march over back to Kamden.
Hi, Kamden.
Now, in terms of an actual score for this short, see, I'm kind of conflicted because I did enjoy it despite those story issues I had, which again, it's not that big a deal, but it's also not my favorite Foghorn for this year. I do prefer the other one. I feel like 7.5 is probably about right, but like it's not a bad short, just not one that I guess excited me as much. So yeah, we'll leave it. Yeah, 7.5.
My interest in merchandise, my interest in collecting, obviously they've got collectibles all around, so made me a little bit happier with it, so it's an 8.5, maybe 8 for me.
Sure. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, that's all, folks.
Don't you usually end with take care?
I do, but I want to try something different.
There's your chicken, Buster.